Speaker Series. Welcome to today's Amplify Tech and Virtual Experiences event. Since we are all now living on Zoom, Skype, Teams, or other virtual platforms for our internal and external communications and events, we thought covering virtual experiences in the healthcare, streaming, and tech industries would be relevant for all of you today. And yes, we hope you will register for the event so we can share your contact info for networking purposes, and you can be entered to win an iPad, compliments of Contempo. The registration for the iPad closes at 12:30. Contempo Design and Communications focuses on branding, environmental graphic design, and website design. I founded Contempo 22 years ago as a solo graphic designer. I have had the pleasure and honor of working with many Northeast Ohio companies, including the Cleveland Indians, Pease & Associates, Infinity Construction, Warrensville Heights City Schools, Stage 3 Talent, and more. Now I'd like to show you a quick video of our work. Contempo Design and Communications was founded over 20 years ago, originally as Contemporary Design Group, Inc. Focusing on creative first, we work with branding and marketing professionals, as well as C-suite executives in Northeast Ohio and throughout the region. We specialize in branding, marketing collateral, environmental graphic design, and digital ad creative for websites, social media, and targeted online advertising. In addition to our creative services, we put on several signature events throughout the year. Our largest event of the year is the Female Entrepreneur Summit. This year's event is expected to draw over 400 attendees who will enjoy a full day of inspiring speakers, roundtable dialogues, and workshops all built for the female entrepreneur. In addition to presentations on relevant topics, the agenda was built to inspire, educate, and provide networking for business growth to all of the attendees. Our event schedule also includes the Amplify Speaker Series. The program, now in its 14th year, brings business and community thought leaders together for an active forum on issues of relevance to Greater Cleveland. And the Home Team Celebration, our only fundraising event of the year. This event helps raise money for Northeast Ohio Adoption Services in preparing families to foster and find forever homes for children in foster care. Please visit contempocleveland.com for more information on our upcoming events and to learn more about our visual branding, environmental graphic design, and digital creative services. Thank you for watching and listening. The hashtag for today's event is AmplifyTech2020, and we encourage you to tweet, use Facebook, YouTube, or our website, available at contempocleveland.com/amplify, to chat. You can use the chat box as well for your questions, or you can put them on any one of those social media networks. Before we get started, I would like to thank the sponsors who helped make this event possible. Gold sponsor, Kent State University, College of Business Administration, and silver sponsor, Cuyahoga Community College. Special thanks goes out to New Image Media. We are here at their studio today in the friendly city of Warrensville Heights, and to BoxCast for providing our streaming platform for today. Finally, I would like to thank our Contempo team members for their efforts in bringing this event together. Now I would like to introduce our facilitator for today's event, my colleague and friend, Kent State University's College of Business Administration Dean DEBORAH SPAKE.
Thank you, Renee. The Kent State College of Business Administration is pleased to once again be a sponsor of the Amplify Tech event. The focus of this event, on sharing the latest technologies and practices for business success, aligns with the college's mission to provide innovative education, leading research, and meaningful engagement with the business community. So let's begin. Each presenter will have 10 to 15 minutes to talk about their topic. And we ask that you send in your questions using hashtag AmplifyTech2020 via Twitter, post them in Facebook, on YouTube, or via the chat box on your screen if you're viewing this from the contempocleveland.com/Amplify page. Now it's my pleasure to briefly introduce each of today's presenters. Their bios can be found on the event registration page. Joining us today are Neil Singh, Director of Technology, Team NEO, Sarah MIHALIK, Managing Director, University Hospitals, and Gordon Daly, CEO and co-founder at BoxCast Inc., who will be starting off the presentations. Please join me in welcoming Gordon.
Thank you, Dean Spake. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Contempo and everyone who's put this on. One of the reasons why I want to be here is because at BoxCast we care a lot about streaming. And you might be asking yourself, okay, who is BoxCast and why are they here? Well, I'll give you an opportunity today to tell you who we are, why it is that we're here, talk a little bit about how streaming has changed our company as a streaming company, and how COVID has changed streaming in the streaming landscape, as well as how COVID's changed society in general. Lastly, and most interestingly, I think we're going to provide some examples of some really exciting real-world customers who are using streaming in some neat ways that I think everybody can take some lessons from. So let's jump right in. Who is BoxCast? You might be asking yourself, well, who is BoxCast? BoxCast is a startup company here in Cleveland that launched in 2013, and now we've grown to have almost 50 to 60 employees in the area. Our focus is on powering the video that you're watching. You probably don't know that you're watching BoxCast because we're the ones that are streaming for high schools, municipality events, weddings, funerals, church services, and many of the other types of business events that are happening, but we're behind the scenes. You may not know that we're there. Believe it or not, a little company in Cleveland's powering over 1 million events a year here. And as we've entered into this COVID era of life and society is changing, you can imagine how much more and more important that's going to be to come. At BoxCast, we believe that every event that happens live should be streamed live. In our minds, for the last decade, as we've been working on the technology, we felt it was a tragedy that there were really great events happening all over the world, but just weren't always making it to the viewers that wish they could be there if they weren't there in person. And that's what we do. We make video streaming really, really easy. If there's an event happening, what we make it possible is for people that can't be there to watch at home on their computers or their iPhones, from a website, from their smart TVs, or from any social media platform. So how has the streaming company been affected by COVID-19? That's a pretty interesting story to tell, certainly, because at BoxCast, we've seen a huge increase, certainly in the number of events that doubled. Now, it's important to note that it's not just these events that are streaming more are ones where people can go to. There's a lot of events where people could not go to. Sporting events stopped immediately. Most public events where people gathered stopped immediately. Yet we still saw a massive increase in just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks of time, broadcasts more than doubling. Even more interesting than that is just the amount of viewership that has exploded for these events. Take away the fact that BoxCast streams for hundreds of NCAA schools and 9 major pro sports teams. Despite that fact, we've saw an explosion of almost 10x in viewership because the reality of needing to be connected is real. So how has society been changed? Society's changed permanently in some very significant ways. Number one, everybody knows what it's like to be remote because they all went remote. Now they're more empathetic to those who can't be at events. Moving forward, these remote viewers will always be treated as first-class citizens. And you know what? It's an interesting thing to think about. If you're an organization, you say to yourself, man, I don't know if I can can put my brand out there to get what I want out of it. And I would say that what matters most, above all, is authenticity. Most of the organizations that we work with have great content already. It doesn't matter if it's highly produced or not. Take, for example, Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show, right? His kids drew this beautiful graphic that he used as his intro graphic. And millions of people all over the world were watching that with excitement. If there's one thing that COVID taught us, it's that it's okay to let your guard down if you're an organization. They just want to get access to those events that you're putting on. And then as you grow with sophistication over time, that will improve. But the key is, what matters most is authenticity and making it available for people that can't be there. So let's talk through a few interesting examples. This is my favorite part of the presentation because I get to show you some real-world examples that include both for-profit organizations, not-for-profit organizations, streaming internally within their community or within their employee base, or externally to the broader audience, or whether it was COVID or not. How did they stream before COVID? How did they stream after COVID? How are they streaming during COVID? The first example I'd like to bring up is the San Diego Padres. I like this example because everything that happens on their Jumbotron at the games is getting streamed privately, internally to the organization for people to quickly access highlight clips, to make those available to sponsors that may have a loge that they've bought. Maybe they catch a foul ball and give them that immediate gratification of, oh, I have the video clip of my family catching that ball. Or some other things that might happen in the ballpark that were interesting with the dizzy bat races. Or the mascot might be dumping the popcorn on the head of the seat in front of them. But those are great season ticket holder type relationships that they can foster and build with their community. The next example I want to talk about that the Padres are using is what happened once all those fans weren't at the games anymore. They still wanted to find a way to engage with them, so what they did was, we'll roll the video, this is a view of the San Diego Padres batting practice. So every day, if you're a season ticket holder for the San Diego Padres, what you can do is you can tune in to watch them take batting practice every day. It's a behind-the-scenes look. Notice how authentic it is. It's not a lot of work to produce this because it's just a camera. It's a still camera in the back of the field. But yet everybody feels like they're getting a behind-the-scenes look if they're a season ticket holder. Great way to engage with their audience. The next example I'd like to talk about is the YMCA. Here in Cleveland, the greater Cleveland YMCA was stuck. Nobody could come to do their workout video. No one could come to do their workouts, so they took their workouts to everybody wherever they were at by streaming it to them. So it's an external tool to take that same great content to help them maintain that habit of exercise. It's so important to the health of the individuals, of their constituents. The next example I'd like to go to is a supermarket. Who would have ever thought that a supermarket would be the place where the community gathers to learn about what's happening in the local regional area? Well, Hy-Vee Today with Tony Tone can be found every morning on their website or on Facebook to learn about what happens in the Muscatine, Iowa area. It could be the mayor has something to share about the new project in town, or they're tasting the delicacies of a new restaurant that just opened up. It turned out to be a really neat hit that I think is really neat to show how a creative use could be done with a community just making themselves more available to those that are interested to see what's going on. The next example I have is here in Cleveland. Kent State University has one of the best schools of podiatric medicine. And they were cutting edge. Rewind the clock for many years, almost a decade, what they've been doing is capturing every single lecture that they have that's offered in the school to make it available to those that couldn't be there. As you can see in this example, we're learning about the long bone. I don't know which bone this is in the foot, but I think it's in the foot somewhere. But what's neat about it is that if you're a student, you can't make it because there's a weather problem, or you want to study for a test, all that video for every class that they have in the whole school is made available to them to study for and to get ready for their exam, to learn the content, which is why they're there in the first place. It's a great example. But the most exciting example for me, the cutest example, is this next one. Yes, these are cute Labrador puppies that are too young to go home to their newfound families that still need to stay with their mom to nurse. Well, if you go to the Snowy Pines White Lab website, you can watch the puppy stream to see your colored collar of your puppy before he's able to come home with you. Maybe it's green and he's chewing on a toy. You can watch this all day long so you can get a chance to know him better and like him better. But think about it from the business perspective. What a great opportunity to offer more, not just to the prospective owners, but also maybe it's a great marketing tool. And this is just an iPhone camera that's aimed at the floor to watch the kids play, and you can watch it every day. The last example I have is with the Strongsville School District. They've done an amazing job with BoxCast to stream all of their public events, board meetings, performing arts events, sporting competitions, community announcements of what's new with the school district and what levies are happening. Let's go ahead and show the clip. This is the video before COVID happened of how their school board meeting might look, as you'd expect. But without missing a beat, if we flip to the next video, you'll see that they immediately could do the exact same thing on Zoom. Though they're distributed, they still were able to address and continue the operations of the business at a really critical time for them to make it so that the school continued to run well and on time. So my closing thoughts for this presentation are that, number one, organizations need to find a way to engage with their audiences, and their audiences are expecting that to be changing, right? You need to understand that that is changing because society has changed, and you have great content. The idea is to think about how can you creatively unlock that content that already exists for people that wish they could be a part of it. Thank you for hearing me talk about streaming content. Now it's my opportunity to introduce the next speaker for today, Mrs. MIHALIK from University Hospitals Ventures.
Thank you, Gordon. I certainly learned a lot from you today and personally have benefited from the fruits of streaming content. It's kept me connected to the people, organizations, and experiences that I love so much. So I'm grateful to you, your team at BoxCast, and I'm even more jazzed that we have such a cool, thriving, innovative company here in Cleveland. So go Cleveland. Thanks. As Gordon mentioned, my name is Sarah MIHALIK. I'm a managing director at University Hospitals, our ventures team. And for those of you that may be tuned in today from outside Northeast Ohio, University Hospitals is an integrated health system serving over 16 counties here for over 150 years. We have 15 hospitals, over 40 health centers across the community, and over 5,000 providers, who I am always humbled by. But even more so in the last 7 months, it's been extraordinary to see how they've come together to really serve our communities during this challenging time. And at UH Ventures, part of our charter is to foster a spirit of innovation across the health system. And we do that in connection with strategic initiatives by looking at opportunities, challenges, and problems, and collaboratively working with the caregivers to identify innovative solutions to address these needs across the health system. And one such area that we've had a lot of experience with over the last several years has been digital health. And there's a lot of promise in digital health, but certainly we've seen an acceleration and an amplification of both use and adoption of digital health throughout the COVID pandemic. So today, I'm hoping that you walk away with a broader understanding of that. How has it really impacted the use of digital health, this whole pandemic that we're in and the new normal that we're in? Two, that you just have a broader understanding of some of the interesting and innovative technologies in this space. And lastly, I'd like to share with you some of the lessons learned that we've had that I think you could apply to any industry and any company. So to get started, let's talk about what is digital health. And if you ask 10 different people, they will probably give you 10 different answers. But for the purposes of today and simplification, we'll talk about digital health as any company that utilizes information technology or software as a means of differentiation in their delivery of health services or health product. And there's a wide variety across the different segments in healthcare. These companies serve payers, providers, and patients. They range from early startup companies to experienced unicorns to large tech conglomerates, just like Gordon mentioned. And we're going to start off today talking about telehealth. I think this is a space that everybody probably has some awareness or understanding of. And there were many barriers to the adoption of and utilization of telehealth over the past decade. And recently there's been a lot of studies that have been done to look at the impact of telehealth throughout the COVID pandemic. Interestingly enough, before the pandemic, McKinsey recently published a study, I should say, in late May of this year. And they found that in 2019, only about 11% of the respondents, when they did their consumer survey, were utilizing telehealth services. And when we fast forward to now, to the present time, it's around 46%. And that is true at university hospitals as well. In 2019, we were doing about 1,000 telehealth visits a month. Now we're doing about 1,000 telehealth visits a day. And during the periods of greatest disruption, in April and May and June of this year, we saw almost 2 to 3 times that. Now things have tapered off a little bit as we've kind of settling in to the new normal that we're in. But what's encouraging is that in this study that McKinsey did, they found that 76% of their survey respondents noted that they had a better appreciation and they're interested in using telehealth moving forward. So that's encouraging. When we look at this through the lens of the provider, this is so important. I mean, hospitals, health systems, providers, we scaled rapidly to meet the gaps and the needs of our patients and communities during a time when we couldn't do in-person visits. So that was, challenging on all fronts. But what was interesting is through this study, McKinsey found that 57% of the providers actually viewed telehealth more favorably, and 64% of providers felt more comfortable using it. And this is so critical because the experience of our providers translates directly to the experience of our patients. So meeting our providers where they're at, integrating these solutions into their workflow, making it natural and easy for them to connect and have a good experience with this is so critical. And lastly, when we look at this through the lens of regulatory, there have been many hurdles pre-COVID to rapid and large-scale adoption, largely related to the coverage of different services and some of the restrictions that were placed on the reimbursements aligned with telehealth. So, one of the largest payers in our country, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, as a good example in this McKinsey study, they expanded during this time to over 80 new services that were provided and really released a lot of those restrictions. So that's been a good ease in terms of driving better adoption of telehealth. So we're curious to see where that'll go. The next example I want to share with you is remote monitoring. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. For those of you that may monitor your glucose at home or monitor your blood pressure or your weight and communicate that with your providers, those are all great examples of remote monitoring. But this solution in healthcare keeps us connected to our patients when they're not with us. And this became incredibly important in this pandemic because we were preparing for a surge of utilization of our hospital resources, our acute care resources, ICU, emergency departments, to the tune of 300 times what we were expecting. Now, thankfully, while we didn't see a surge anywhere close to that, we were prepared for it, and now we've got a good foundation to build from as part of that. So an example of this is we partnered with a global company in non-invasive patient monitoring called Masimo. And Masimo provides a small pulse oximeter that connects to the finger, and that's connected to a smart wristband. And that device is collecting really important clinical vital signs on the patient, their pulse ox, their respiratory rate, and these are important clinical indicators. When we see those vitals declining or decelerating in nature, those are indicators that the patient might be declining. So by implementing this platform, we were able to discharge patients back to the home so they could heal in the comfort of their own home, but still have the assurance for both them as a patient and the provider that, if we needed to, we could intervene quickly. And that was all monitored by a remote central command center within the health system at University Hospital, so we could stay connected with those patients. And in a post-COVID world, we see many applications for this. When we look at populations of people who are undergoing transplant, oftentimes those patients have to stay in the hospital for long periods of time to make sure they're not rejecting their medication. So that's just one example of places where we can see this potentially playing out. Another example I'd like to share with you is automated virtual care and patient engagement through AI-enabled conversation platforms that leverage chatbots as a mode of connecting in a very personalized way with the patient. So in 2018, university hospitals partnered with Conversa Health. They're an important player in the automated virtual care space. And we did this with patients who had chronic disease that were being discharged from the hospital and going home or going to a post-acute care setting as a way, again, to stay connected with them through device-agnostic methods, either a mobile phone, an iPad, a computer. This is not an app, which makes it easier for people to engage with. But this conversation platform is personalized to the patient, and it allows us to collect patient-reported outcomes, to push information to them, and to navigate them to the right side of care. And when COVID came into our worlds, we leveraged this same platform to really address the worried well in our community. So we put this conversation platform on our website as a way for the worried well to check their symptoms, get information about this novel disease, and navigate them to the right site. If they did in fact need testing based on the symptoms and how they were being risk stratified, it would navigate them to the right side of care. And we also implemented this with our employees. So we wanted to make sure that our employees, our patients, and all of our teammates were safe in a return to work mode. So we did have manual screening processes for all of our employees, but we mobilized this and implemented this as a way to check the symptoms in a very consistent, personalized way with our employees to ensure a safe return to work. So another great example of an awesome digital health technology. And lastly, I want to share an example of an immersive technology. And Neil's going to talk much more deeply about this in just a second here, but this is a digital platform that utilizes augmented and mixed reality. And like Gordon, this company, Augment Therapy, is based here in Cleveland. So, I mean, there are so many cool things happening in this city. But their founder, Lindsay Watson, she wanted a way to provide more interactive, more meaningful, more consistent, and more scalable pediatric therapeutic services across the health industry. So we did a pilot before COVID even kicked off with this technology, and no better way to describe it than to show you a short clip. Thank you. So one thing I want to just celebrate and note, speaking of innovation in Cleveland here, is Augment Therapy was just awarded the most promising startup in Cleveland. But this is really just another great example of how we can use digital platforms to provide a more interactive experience. We've had great results with this in the pilot that we did, very good quantitative feedback as well as qualitative feedback from both our providers and our patients. So in summary, this has taught us a lot, and I just shared with you a sampling of some of the innovation that's happening and the ways that COVID has really amplified and accelerated our use of digital technologies in healthcare. But 3 lessons learned that I think you can take away from this that we certainly experienced at university hospitals was, one is just rapid decision making, not tripping over good to be perfect, and leveraging the governance structures that you have in place to drive that decision making. 2, the power of a team. There's no I in team, as my parents would always tell me, and I tell my kids. But with that, there's such great innovation that comes from diversity, and diversity in experience, diversity in people, diversity in thinking, and ideation. So bring your teams together. And we did that in just the most remarkable way possible that I've ever had the opportunity to experience over the last 7 months. It gave us hope. You know, we've got to keep that teamwork and innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship alive in the new normal that we're in. And lastly, I think we have to always still account for the people who can't use digital solutions. So we have to be mindful of how we deliver our work and our product and our services in a world where there are differences in terms of the access to digital care. So that's something we need to think about. We've certainly learned that, and I think that applies to every industry as well. So thank you. I'm so, again, grateful to share with you something that I'm very passionate about, healthcare, and certainly our health is our greatest asset. So with that, I'd like to introduce Neil Singh, who's the Director of Technology at Team Neo, and he's going to talk a bit more about immersive technology.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Gordon, for your very informative presentations. Hi, I'm Neil Singh. I'm Director of Technology at Team Neo. Team Neo is the Regional Economic Development Partner of Jobs Ohio, and we help companies across Northeast Ohio with talent, workforce, and technology adoption. Today I'm here to talk to the audience about augmented and virtual reality technologies and how industries are applying this technology in their day-to-day business in many, many ways. Much like how the mobile phone has transformed communications, AR and VR as a computing platform is transforming the way we work, collaborate, learn, and play. This chart, recently produced and provided by IDC, shows industry adoption and growth in the AR/VR industries. As Sarah alluded to, augmented reality and virtual reality is playing a big role in healthcare, but as well as healthcare, education, manufacturing, industry IoT, many industries are being impacted by this technology, and adoption is growing at a very, very rapid rate, 77% as identified by IDC, sorry. To some of the attendees today, it may be confusing as to how augmented and virtual reality tools can be used in their specific industry. So today I've got some examples of different industries and companies from Northeast Ohio as well who are using this technology every day. The first example is of dog heat simulations. They're actually a Seattle-based company and a Florida-based company, and they produced a social VR technology called Roomie. Many different ways for users to interact and collaborate, and is a much more immersive experience than Zoom or Teams, as most of you are probably used to using. Another company that's using augmented reality that we're all familiar with is Keurig, the makers of the coffee machines. They're using AR to enhance the shopping experience. As you can see in this video, augmented reality is not just limited to head-mounted devices, it can also be applied on your mobile phone. So it's very accessible to the majority of users in the world. what's really interesting about the way Keurig has presented this technology is that they take data-driven information from their systems to actually drive e-commerce and sales for their products. The next example that I would like to give the audience is Lincoln Electric, a company here very well known in Northeast Ohio and also a global brand. Lincoln Electric is using virtual reality technologies to train the welders of the future. So this is really about talent and workforce development. Lincoln Electric's VR360 platform, which they've engineered in-house, enables new welders to learn, using virtual reality technologies, all of the industry trade skills that they need to become professional welders. The Vertex or VRTEX 360 platform was actually engineered specifically by Lincoln Electric as a tool to help train their workforce. And now they're also offering this technology to their clients and customers globally. It allows Lincoln Electric students to learn, not just learn welding, but also learn how to use the equipment correctly prior to taking on real-world welding projects. The final example that I have for all of you today is Rockwell Automation, another global leader based right here in Northeast Ohio. Rockwell has been working with their clients and PTC, a very famous augmented reality company, to develop solutions for manufacturers. In this example, Rockwell is showing how to use digital twins and how these can be created for equipment and machinery, and how to use AR to overlay this operational equipment to create efficiency and predictive maintenance in how the equipment is used. Take it away. Using IoT sensors combined with digital twins and augmented reality, data can be visualized. This data is then integrated into more traditional dashboards where users can generate reports, diagnose problems, perform many other business-related functions, and keep the manufacturing plant operating at optimum efficiency smoothly. I hope these examples have provided the viewers today with some real-world use cases in better understanding how augmented and virtual reality technologies can be used, whether it's marketing, productivity, collaboration, education, healthcare, or advanced manufacturing. AR and VR is being applied to many different industries. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to hand it over to Deborah for questions and answers.
Thank you, Neil. And the first question goes to you. You shared with us a number of technology solutions today. We appreciate that. But which technology solution do you see being most widely adopted right now?
I think augmented reality is the one which is most widely adopted by everyone at the moment, because augmented reality can be used on your mobile device or your mobile phone. There are large players in the industry such as Google and Apple, for example, who have created tools within your mobile phone devices that can easily take advantage of augmented reality. Most of us are probably using some form of augmented reality without even realizing it. I know for the younger people out there, they're using the games like Pokemon Go, they're using social media apps like Snapchat. All of these technologies are based on AR.
Thank you. Then the next question goes to Gordon. Gordon, how much does it cost to get started with BoxCast? And if someone is considering adopting it, what technology considerations should they be thinking about?
Well, the expense really isn't as much the BoxCast side of it, because BoxCast isn't very expensive. It's just $99 a month to get started for organizations, and they can then make that available, the video available to any size audience anywhere on any of the social media platforms or their website. You know, it really comes down to a little bit more of thinking through how you want that to be done and the time you're going to put into making that event successful. So it's really easy to get started for sure, and I encourage everybody to find a way. Whether you're going to choose BoxCast or not, you really need to be engaging with your communities the best you can, your audiences the best you can. But as you want to get a little bit more sophisticated in the type of production of the event you want, you may have more of a budget that might be applied towards that. For example, today we're really fortunate. We have new image media that's here to help us put on a show like this, which is really helpful with such great speakers that came to talk. But you can graduate into more sophistication as your comfort level allows you to do so.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Sarah. Sarah, you mentioned that during the pandemic there was quite a big spike in patients participating in telehealth visits, but that after a while that number dropped off as in-person visits resumed. What do you think the new normal will be going forward?
That's a great question. I think the new normal is probably going to be a blend. We need to meet people where they're at, and you know, there's never going to be a time when all virtual is right, and certainly I think we've learned there's value to doing things in a remote way. There's a convenience factor to that. There's a cost factor to that. So I really think that the new normal is going to be a blended model where we'll see a mix of, you know, in-person and virtual ways of delivering and receiving care.
Okay, another question for you, Sarah. Does university hospitals, or how does university hospitals address some of the barriers that exist for people in their ability to use and adopt digital health solutions?
Sure, and I would say we're still learning on this. I think the industry is learning on this, but some of the things we learned with the solutions and the technologies that I talked about today, I'll give you a specific example, which is our employee health screener that we deployed for our own teammates and caregivers across the system to do screening for COVID. You know, at the end of the day, everybody has different devices and everybody has a different comfort level with digital platforms like this. So we really had to, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's true in the answer to this question is we have to think about the fact that not everybody has the same type of access and digital means for engaging. So we need to have a hybrid approach for that as well and think about the people that we're trying to meet. So that's probably one of the biggest barriers that I can think of right off the bat. I also think there's a big regulatory piece to this. You know, in healthcare, it's so important to bring cost-effective and high-value care to consumers and patients. So there's still, necessary push that's needed to make sure that we keep the momentum on the reimbursement and regulatory front to make it easy to access and reimbursable for both patients and for health care providers.
Okay, thank you. The next question from Justin, who posted on the Contempo website, is for Neil. Neil, no one can predict the future, but the question is, what do you think VR and AR will look like 10 years from now, particularly in terms of training?
In terms of training, I think companies are already realizing the potential of AR and VR tools in the workforce. In manufacturing, I can give you a very good example. It saves money. If you can train your workforce using augmented reality or virtual reality technologies, then you're basically not throwing new recruits into the machine operational environment where, you know, they could break something or something could malfunction and it wouldn't be a very good sort of training environment for them. But using something like VR, the students are able to learn using digital twins, using real world examples essentially in that 3D environment, and they can see exactly how something works and figure out what they need to learn about it before they actually use the real machinery. So that's for just one training example, but there are many more. I know in Sarah's industry, doing heart surgery, for example, you know, learning how to do heart surgery using augmented reality or mixed reality tools. In terms of how I think the technology is going to evolve, you know, head-mounted devices seem to be one of the areas of very big innovation investment right now, and that's basically the headsets that you wear. I think we're going to see much more sleek headsets, more like your casual eyewear, you know, emerging in the next few years, which is easy to buy, which is easy to wear and easy to use. So I think in terms of augmented reality, just the accessibility of these types of products will become a lot better. The other thing with virtual reality, we're seeing very high quality systems that are being produced, but one of the difficulties is that with VR, you need, I guess, an entirely new computing platform. So that's another conversation for another day, but VR does depend on having more technology, basically, and I'm not sure how that's going to evolve.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, the next question's for you. Are there differences in payment for telehealth appointments versus other types? In other words, are insurance companies covering these in the same way?
Yeah, so that's varies. I would say what I think we're seeing now is that payers are incentivizing certain services to be delivered in a remote or telehealth way, and you know, incentives that look like no copays or low copays for patients who use those services. But you know, when it comes to how that's going to look, you know, over the next 2 years, I think we need to see. But it's highly variable by payer. But in general, we're starting to see a great incentive to use these emerge.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Gordon. Much like the future question that we asked of Neil, what do you think is the next iteration for BoxCast? Perhaps in terms of types of industries or new features?
Well, there is one good thing I can say is that the markets that we're going into now are just starting to open up. And so we have our hands full, to be quite honest with you, with serving community organizations, primarily churches, amateur sports programs, schools, municipalities, because the minority of them are streaming and the majority of them need to stream. So we've got our hands full, to be honest with you, for the short-term foreseeable future. But there is so much technology that can be created to help make that better and more engaging. On the capture side, one thing that is really exciting that just came out about a month ago that we released was the ability for at a sporting event where there's a scoreboard, we made a little box that can connect to any scoreboard. And it's a really smart little box. It'll automatically figure out which vendor it is, and you have to tell it which sport you're trying to play. But what it'll do is create a real-time ESPN-like scoreboard onto the screen so that the viewers at home have a much more engaging experience. So there's a function of improving the viewer's experience that we think we can improve dramatically like that. There's a lot of neat ideas we have about how we can make the broadcaster's experience more reliable, better quality, working the way they want, and to engage with the viewers better. So that's what's neat about being in an exciting environment. Is it's a little bit like the Wild West. It's a very new market as everybody is now learning, hey, we're living in this digital online world, because so many of our organizations that have such great content were always on-site experiences, and now we're making that digital.
Okay, thank you. Back to Sarah. It seems like there's a lot of momentum for digital health growth and adoption due to COVID. What actions do hospitals and health systems need to keep the digital momentum going?
That's another good question. So I think where I'd like to start with that is, we are always patients first, patient-centric. But in this case, I think it's important to put the providers in the center of this to keep the momentum going. Because as I mentioned, the provider experience translates to the patient experience. And there's already so many challenges for providers today in their workflow, and lots of things competing for their time and their attention in the patient, provider encounter. So I think it's going to be really important that we put the providers in the center of that we listen to them, that we design these solutions around their workflow, integrate it into their workflow in a way that makes it efficient. And that will translate into those providers being champions of that with their patients. And patients trust their providers. So it really needs to be coming from a provider-centric view. I think another thing that we need to do to keep that momentum going is think about the patient's journey and the patient's experience. So, using things like human-centered design to design the experience and the journey that matters most to the patient, and fine-tune that so that the experience with these digital technologies is a good one. Those are just two things that I think will be critical, in addition to the focus within Congress and with the payers on the regulatory side, to make sure that we can keep the incentives aligned and the reimbursement path really progressive.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Gordon, and Gordon, it's sports related. So one of the participants posted a question asking, what do you think the future of sporting events will be like now that services like yours are available?
This is very similar, I think, to the telehealth question that Sarah brought up earlier. I think it's going to be blended. The information that I'm starting to hear from folks is that the bulk of society isn't really going to feel like they're comfortable going on person to anything until maybe the next 2 years, till the end of 22. And if that's really the case, you're going to see people that want that engaging experience of their being on site if they can be there because it's meaningful to them. But I think you're always going to have the opposite that's true too, where people just don't have the comfort level to be there. So it's a blended answer of, it's going to take a while, I think, it's going to be blended, I think, indefinitely from this point on, because technology isn't something that's ever going away. Nor is the experience of being there firsthand, to be there, if you can, face-to-face with your loved ones, or something that's really important for your job, if you can have the opportunity to.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Neil. And Neil, it's somewhat related. So post-COVID, what do you think the workplace will be like now that all these technologies are available and people are remote working?
So I think the key word here is engagement. We've had to learn new ways of working in the last 6 or 7 months due to COVID. And as Gordon has referred to, the digital transformation is taking place in terms of how we engage and interact with everyday things, as well as in the work environment, but also in other environments that we live in. VR is a technology that allows for direct engagement, direct social engagement through avatars and characters that you would create in these immersive worlds. This is why a technology such as VR, for example, is referred to as the next generation computing platform. When you saw in one of my videos the Rumi example, that's a social VR platform. Social VR platforms like Rumi, like Facebook Horizons, which recently got launched, these are places where people can communicate, collaborate, work, play, and do a number of other things, much like they would in a real world work scenario or a real world interactive scenario. So that level of engagement is something that VR enables now. And it's going to continue to get better and better as we progress the technology further. So that would be how I would respond to that.
All right, thank you. Sarah, this question goes back to you. While there has been a lot of momentum in all these technologies due to COVID, what technologies or what do you think the new normal will be like post-COVID? And do you think, I know you addressed a moment ago about the technology barriers, how will patients who right now have not been able to use telehealth, what do you think they will be like in the future in terms of adoption?
So I think, we need to understand people. We need to understand the people we're serving. So when we think about people who haven't had the ability to utilize or access these digital platforms, I think we need to understand why. And that helps us think innovatively about how we provide those services to those populations that we serve. Whether it's, designing that access into the program, whether it is mobilizing a coordination team around the patients to give them a navigator in that process. So I think it goes back to understanding the people we're serving and understanding what those challenges have been and how and what we're capable of addressing as healthcare providers.
Okay, thank you. That seems to be the last of the posted questions today. Any final thoughts from any of you about your topics?
I have one thought that came out of the question you asked me, and if you don't have as many people that are going to events that they might have been paying to go to in the past, how has the business model changed, right? Because it changes so substantially when you're counting on fans, if you're a high school, to pay money to come into the gate, and then to buy a hot dog or two, or in my case 3 or 4 because I love hot dogs. But that money that used to come in that they could depend on is really not going to be there anymore. So that shift of spend, discretionary spend, is real in our own lives too, as we cut the cord and aren't paying the same amount of money maybe to the cable company we once did. How am I going to reallocate that discretionary spend into buying the types of content that I'm interested in? That's what I think is really interesting, is how there's this shift of newfound money opportunities to buy more selective, granular content. And that's where these organizations who have very specific needs with very specific audiences have an opportunity, I think, not to cash in, it's not the right word, but to capture, to help sustain their mission into the future.
To build upon what Gordon was saying as well, with some of these technologies like streaming and like VR, for example, while we can't attend a sports game live right now because of COVID and other things happening in the world, VR and technologies like streaming will enable us to be in the action virtually. So if you can imagine that, that's a technology that's available today, it's available to everyone today, and that's a way that people will be consuming this kind of content or activity as we move into the future. So it's very exciting when you combine what Gordon's doing, for example, with other technologies like VR.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, any final thoughts?
I mean, just on that note, I'm just thinking as you were sharing that about a conference that I was so excited to attend, later this year, and it's a conference that I pay for every year. And so this is a way, the business model, they're still charging for this event. I'm thrilled that they're having it, and I still see the value in being able to connect with that and pay for those services. So I do think it's forcing us to think differently about the business model of things, but I'm encouraged.
Thank you. That's all the time we have today for questions. I want to thank everyone for your participation and invite Renee back to the platform. Thank you, Renee, for pivoting so that we could deliver this event virtually, and for keeping Amplify, the Amplify tradition ongoing. Now I think it's time for the iPad drawing.
It is. Thank you, Deb, and thank you, Gordon and Sarah and Neil. I appreciate all of the content today, and I certainly learned a lot, so thank you. We had the opportunity behind the scenes to randomize the registrants from today's event, and I would like to announce that Ashley St. Pierre, Marketing Director from Fred Martin Auto Group, is the recipient of the iPad. And I happen to know Ashley, and I will make sure that you get that iPad sent to you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the content, and visit contempocleveland.com for more upcoming events. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.